Hey everybody, Tim Alpert here, and thank you for listening to the YFP Podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week I welcome pharmacist turned entrepreneur Lan Ho, founder of Fat Miilk Vietnamese coffee company that's based in Chicago, Illinois. We discuss her career journey in pharmacy, why she started Fat Miilk, what she learned after appearing in the finale of Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars, the most important things she's learned about herself since starting the business, and what lies ahead for Fat Miilk in the coming years. Let's hear a brief message from today's sponsor, Pearls, and then we'll jump into my interview with Lan.
This is Justin Woods from the YFP team with a quick message before today's show. If you're tired of relying on shared passwords or spending hundreds of dollars for drug information, we've got great news for you. Today's podcast sponsor, Pearls, is changing the game for pharmacy professionals. Pearls offers top drug summaries, clinical teaching points, a drug interaction checker, calculators, and guideline reviews all in one user-friendly resource. They also recently added free weekly quizzes to test your pharmacotherapy knowledge. Whether you're on your web browser or accessing the mobile app, Pearls has got you covered. Visit pearls.com, that's PYRLS.com, to get access to more than 25 free pharmacotherapy charts to get you started. Upgrade your drug information resources today with Pearls. Don't miss out on this game-changing resource.
Lan, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. I ran across your entrepreneurial journey after a former student of mine reached out and said, hey, you've got to check out this pharmacist turned entrepreneur. She's going to be on the final of Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars. Of course, I said, heck yeah, pharmacist entrepreneur. I'll be following that. And as I learned more about your story, I was fascinated with the work that you've been doing, why you've gotten into this area of work. And I wanted to introduce it to our community as well. And so we're going to spend most of our time on your entrepreneurial journey, but let's start with your career in pharmacy. What drew you into the profession? Where did you go to school? And what area of practice did you find yourself in after graduation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to dive into all of that because it definitely is quite the story. My start in pharmacy, I will say, look, I probably did it for all the wrong reasons, right? And I say that because of multiple things. One, I come from a family, both my parents are Vietnam refugees, right? So they're always pushing us to go for that really secure and stable career path. And the only thing that they really know is education is the kind of the only way to do it, right? And so, me and my siblings were all in healthcare. And I think when you're at a young age and you don't have a plan B and you didn't grow up having role models and people to show you that there are other ways to kind of live life and go about your careers, the only thing that we really knew was to go to school and do something that's secure and stable and get that degree, right? Yeah. So if I had a backup plan, if I kind of knew what I wanted to do, I'm sure I could have, posed a really good argument to my parents and be like, this is what I want to do instead. I want to start my business. I want to go into the creative arts. I want to, all these things, but I didn't have a plan B, right? So I was easily persuaded into doing something that my parents wanted me to do. And at the time, that was pharmacy. Pharmacy in Vietnam is considered like the gold standard for like one of the best career paths and just lifestyle. And so really conformed to that, made my dad really, really happy, the only pharmacist in the family. And I was good at school. I'm good at learning. I'm good at teaching myself anything. And I excelled in education and in higher education. I went there, got my pharmacy degree, and had a great relationship with the district manager at Walgreens. And I always thought I was going to do a fellowship, but during my rotation, with the district manager at Walgreens, we just vibed. It was all about relationships, right? And we just had a really, really good time together. Really loved it. He offered me a job after I graduated. And so that's how I ended up in community pharmacy.
I love that story, Lan. And I think it's so important that we all share our collective stories, right? I think sometimes going into pharmacy school, which could be true of medicine and I'm sure other health professions, sometimes there's internal motivations, sometimes there's external motivations. Sometimes people have external motivations that, over time they fall in love with the professional work that they're doing. Other times they don't. And there is no one right path, right? And I think for everyone that's on their own journey, just as you are, just as I am, so important to do that self-discovery work and really to find the path, that is most meaningful. And I think as your story highlights so well, very rarely is one's career path a straight line, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes in pharmacy school, I graduated in 2008, and I often felt the pressure, and I can tell even graduates today, they feel this pressure that, there's graduation, you take that first job or fellowship or residency, and that, from there on, it's going to be one straight path. And my career has looked like left turns, right turns, some straightaways, right? But and there's a lot more to go. And I think as your journey, that is the case as well. And just a lot of wisdom there to share. And I think as you continue on your entrepreneur journey, perhaps this is just one of many twists and turns that you're going to take, throughout your career. So let's talk about that entrepreneurial business journey. Give us the information on your company, Fat Miilk. What is the product and offering, and why did you start it?
Yeah. So Fat Miilk is the first Vietnamese CPG. And for people who don't know, CPG stands for Consumer Packaged Good. We're the first Vietnamese CPG coffee company in Chicago, right? And so a lot of people don't know is that, Vietnam is the number one producer of Robusta in the world. We're a huge player in the coffee industry. And what you're seeing now is just a wave of first generation Vietnamese entrepreneurs who are really showcasing that and really trying to put Vietnamese coffee on the map, right? I think prior to like the last couple of years, like 1 or 2 years ago, you could not walk into any major retailer, Walmart, Whole Foods, whatever, and find Vietnamese Robusta beans on the shelf. It just didn't exist. And so I'm really playing in an emerging category right now. And we'll say prior to launching Fat Miilk, I've conceptualized this idea forever. Vietnamese coffee in my household was a staple. We grew up on that stuff. And I just always thought, why do you have to go to a Vietnamese restaurant, like a pho restaurant or a banh mi restaurant, to really get Vietnamese coffee? And sometimes you don't even know if it's really Vietnamese coffee, right? It's just the way that it's, presented. And so I saw this opportunity, not just to use Vietnamese coffee as the medium to what I want to present out there, but also like, if you look at what I've built with Fat Miilk, you see so much of the story there, so much of like the story of the people behind the bean and just the culture, right? And that's really what I enjoy. I really enjoy creative writing, creative strategy, and I love connecting with the consumer, and that's where I thrive. So long story short, Fat Miilk is a coffee company. We sell whole bean coffee. I import it directly from Vietnam, and we have some really other exciting product lines that we are pushing forward as well. But on top of that, we're building out our first Chicago flagship storefront at the same time.
That's awesome. That's
a lot
awesome.
going on.
And we're going to talk about that as we get towards the end, kind of what is the next stage? Where do you see the future? And I think that's obviously an important part of that. And I hope our listeners will go check out what you're doing. We're going to link to your website, fatmiilk.com. That has 2 eyes, just so people know as they're looking that up. Please grab some coffee. You've got some other products on there as well. My wife and I have been working through a 5-pound bag over the last few weeks. It's delicious. And I would just highly encourage, our listeners to check it out. And I will say, Lan, one of the things that really stood out to me is I did some background research on what you're building is the strength that you have in storytelling and branding and marketing. You mentioned that creative pursuit. That is obvious in the work that you're doing. So, lean into that strength. I know you are, but it's really an incredible one to watch. Now, I've got some questions. Coffee, beverage, it's a big industry, right? And for those that watch Shark Tank, you know that the sharks are quick to object to beverage companies knowing that this is a crowded space. So I think you answered this in part when you talked about the Vietnamese heritage of this product, but tell us more about what makes this product unique, especially as you think about coffee and beverage being such a big industry.
Yeah. I think that when people see such a big industry, they get a little intimidated by it, right? And there's some major players in the coffee industry, but I almost see it as an opportunity, right? Like, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm playing in an industry that already has demand, and it's actually pandemic proof. Like, if you look at coffee industry, it I think it drastically increased during the pandemic, right? And so this is something that people see as a daily necessity. It's a commodity. I mean, and if you're able to enter a market that already is going to stay, and create something that's niche, but also unique, you can really, really stand out, right? Yeah. So when I look at really saturated markets, even in pharmacy, community pharmacies or independent pharmacies, there's always a way. There's always a way. And if you hit on that unique proposition, you will stand out and you will win big, right? And so I think we're playing within the coffee industry at large, which is like $130 billion worldwide industry, by the way. But the Vietnamese coffee category is new in the US, right? Obviously, overseas in Vietnam and Australia and a lot of the other neighboring countries, Vietnamese coffee is very known and popular. But here in the US, I have an opportunity to really be a first mover. And I think that if done right, and you do it with intentionality, you do it with heart, you do it with community, that to me, you can create a legacy brand out of that. And that's what I intend to do.
Yeah, I love that, right? Because I think that, and these examples exist in pharmacy. You're spot on. We tend to speak in generalities, right? Independent pharmacy is dead. Community pharmacy is changing or evolving, but there's niche markets, right? And you talked about in your space, obviously there's a niche. What's your differential advantage? What are you bringing that's different? Obviously, you are and what you're building. And I think that's so important, that we kind of get away from some of those generalities, especially as we think about business and really trying to figure out, okay, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's the opportunity? And how can I bring something that's different or new or unique or serves a niche that maybe otherwise hasn't been served as it relates to this product?
And I think that's just business in general, right? Like you can't go into a market and just do something that everybody else is doing, right? That's not good business. You have to look at the market and see what you can bring to the table and what makes you unique. And I will say with Fat Miilk, when I look at, I will say right now, being a Vietnamese coffee company is and can be enough, right? Because we are so new to the market. But I will say that's not what that's not the angle that I'm taking. What I bring with Fat Miilk is a lifestyle, And so when you look at it, and we're launching our new website actually on November 15th, and this whole Fat Miilk 2.0 situation is, I've really been able to capture the first 2 years of Fat Miilk, analyze what was working and what wasn't working, and really determine who we are and who we're not, and got down to the roots and realized we need to exist for more reasons than to just make Vietnamese coffee accessible. And so when you look at Fat Miilk and our intention to expand, what really makes us different is a whole lifestyle approach to Vietnamese coffee, but we're also merging two industries together. There's this streetwear, very hype culture that exists in, a lot of sneaker and streetwear brands, into a food and beverage company, and so at the core of all of that is this hustle mentality with a lot of humility, right? And that's how I grew up. Both my parents coming here, that's something that I always wanted to honor. Like, I don't want to be this incredibly luxury brand, but I want to be something that's relatable to the times, right? And at the end of the day, me going from pharmacy to this was something that was so intentional about taking a bet on yourself, right? Which like everyone says, and really doing it with humility and doing it with intentionality, with value at its core.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Lan, because I think that concept, the hustle mentality, the taking a bet on yourself, I think a lot of pharmacists struggle with that, and part of that goes to, what we often talk about on the show, the golden handcuffs of you got a doctorate degree, you got a 6-figure income, you got $200,000 of student loans. Yeah. It's hard to take that risk. It's hard to, have that hustle mentality when obviously you're making that kind of income. And I think, as you alluded to, that goes back to in part your upbringing and, some of that entrepreneurial spirit that you obviously have. And one of the things I want to dive into a little bit deeper, and you mentioned at the top of this episode, was some of the family impact on your journey, not only to pharmacy, but obviously on entrepreneurship as well. And you've talked about publicly on Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars. I've also seen it referenced in other articles that have featured your story, that you didn't share your business pursuits with your family. until after you had launched the business for some time. One article I read said, quote, long story short, I started an entire company pretending to be a full-time pharmacist and later came clean on national television while competing for Gordon Ramsay's partnership. Tell us more about that.
Yes. Look, in entrepreneurship, I say this over and over and over again, you have to protect your energy, right? And especially in the beginning, look, Vietnamese coffee, I went from being a pharmacist to, dealing lattes. And so for my parents, especially my dad, he didn't understand that. And for me, I was like, I don't think you need to understand it right now. I think when a lot of people have their opinions and tell you, oh, I like that idea. I don't like that idea. Why are you doing this? It's exhausting and it's taxing to just the emotional capacity that you have and the mental capacity. And when you're starting a business, you need your best self, and there are just so many moments where I would kind of try to bring it up, and kind of talk about Fat Miilk and how coffee, there's this huge opportunity, Vietnamese coffee, US, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I was just presented with so much resistance, and that to me was something that was so evident that as I'm building Fat Miilk, I have to build it to a stage where there's no turning back, And so I was going to do it no matter what, because look, we don't have to go into it, but I was a pretty miserable person when I was a pharmacist. And I just knew that this was not the career choice for me and that I was going to do something creatively and I was going to do it without my parents. And that was a big secret that I kept to myself. And a lot of it was for me more than anything, because if I knew I invited that kind of energy into just the building stage of Fat Miilk, I would have had to not only find the strength to keep going, but find the strength to resist that feedback, right? That negative energy that I just did not need in my life while I was trying to make something happen. And it all comes from a good place. I don't, the people who tell you who are going to challenge you the most are the people that probably love you the most, right? So there's no ill feelings there. It's just, for me, it was so important. I always encourage people, do an audit about what you're telling people. And until you're at a place to invite their opinions or their feedback into your life, keep it to yourself. Do yourself that favor.
Yeah, you have to protect your energy. I love that. Such words of wisdom, that you shared there. And so important. I got that vibe, right? When I watched the show and I followed some of your journey, read some articles, I got a vibe that it was coming from a place of love. And, I think that for the entrepreneurs that are listening, they know that well around the need to protect their energy. So important. And I think you also shared very well that also, when you think about who's around you and some of the energy that you're surrounding yourself with, and, there's a place to be challenged, certainly, but especially early in that journey, the momentum that you're sustaining. You talked about, that hustle mentality, the energy that you're going to need to sustain that, to see through the vision and the idea that you have. So important, especially early on in the journey. Let's talk about your experience on Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars. What an incredible opportunity. And for those that are listening that are not familiar with the show, can you just give us a quick general premise of what that show is all about?
Yes. So Gordon Ramsay's Food Stars, it is his brand new show, season 1. It's on Fox, but essentially he invited 15 of the most promising food and beverage entrepreneurs to compete for $250,000 of his angel investment. Yeah.
And the 15, one of the things I was wondering, and maybe this was mentioned early in the show and I missed it, but how did you get selected as one of those 15? Was there an audition process or what did that look like?
So me personally, they reached out to me on Instagram. So I got recruited to be on the show. There was a casting director who reached out and said, hey, let me know if you'd be interested in this show. I think you'll be a good fit. And so for me, I thought it was fake news from the beginning. I literally went to Gordon Ramsay's Instagram and saw that he was promoting the show as well. So that's when I knew it was legit. So there was an application, kind of on the internet that you could go and apply. I think only one person out of the entire cast actually applied and got the position, or, got to go on the show. Everyone else was recruited.
Okay. That's cool. I was wondering about the process to get there, and we're not going to spill all of what happened. We're going to make people go watch it if they haven't watched it. We'll just say that you were in the final three, and we'll leave it at that.
Yes.
One of the things I'm really curious about is, what you see on TV and obviously the thing that you experience. I know those are two very, very different things. And, I'm curious, as you reflect back on that experience, what are one or two things that really stand out to you of things that you look back and say, wow, because of that experience, I learned this about myself? What really were some of the takeaways that you had from that show?
Yeah. One of the biggest things that people tell me that I maybe I didn't know, I really didn't know this about myself, was how poised I am, right? Mm-hmm. That is probably, so I learned a lot about myself based on how other people perceive me. And that was like probably the number one feedback when people would DM me, comment on my Instagram, Facebook, send me messages, emails, everything. They were just like, we're such a big fan of you. We felt like you held it together. You're very professional, very poised. And then you're just like, wow, I didn't know that I actually am like that. So you start to kind of think like, this is how I present myself, and unknowingly how people see me in business. Right. So that was kind of something that I learned about myself just being on TV. And I think another thing is that you have to take risk, right? I remember when they reached out to me, I had no intention on being on television. And I may have unlocked some other opportunities because of that. But I remember telling myself, look, if you're going to do this Fat Miilk thing and you're going to build this to be what, a global company or whatever the potential you think it is, you have to go out there and put it all on the line. You have to take that risk, right? And I remember telling myself that this is what it takes when you want to turn that big corner in your career, your life, whatever it is that you're doing. You got to go out swinging, and you have to be able to step up to it when that opportunity comes along. And that was not only evident in some of the challenges on the show where I really took up space, right?
Yes.
This was going on the show in and of itself was an example of that. And I think sometimes a lot of entrepreneurs probably reached out to so many people seeing if, hey, you want to go on the show? Do you want to do this? And a lot of people are like, oh no, me on television? No, And so a lot of people, I think a lot of businesses probably turned that opportunity down, and I think for me, the biggest thing was it does pay off when you not only stay prepared, but you are prepared and you're willing to flex that preparation, because I had 1 month to leave my life in Chicago and go to LA to film this thing. And that's exactly what happened, and made it all the way to the finale, like you said. So, it paid off.
Yeah. And I think just saying yes to that opportunity, I think sometimes we see those opportunities. You're like, it'd be so nice, right? If I had that kind of break. But I think your point is a really good one, that you have to have a willingness to say yes. You entered into an unknown territory. I'm sure there were fears and anxieties, surrounded that. And just what you shared in the wisdom of taking up space, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. I would say pharmacist entrepreneurs even struggle more with just that concept of taking up space, not only by being on the show, but then within, the show and the interactions, making sure that you're taking up the space that you need as well to grow. And hopefully, there's some promotion, there's other opportunities. But what I'm also hearing from you, which I love, is the personal growth that happened through the experience. Because I firmly believe that often the ceiling, how high, how far a business can go, is directly correlated to the mindset of the leader of that organization, which is you, the founder and the CEO. And what I'm hearing is this vast expansion of the mindset of what you believe is possible and where you can take this brand and where you can take this business. So I love that. I recall, Lan, one of the experts, and I can't remember his name. I think he was from maybe Albertsons, Whole Foods. You can point me back in the right direction. That, I would say he was somewhat critical of the branding and the disconnect that he was seeing in terms of the coffee and the product being in a carton, maybe somewhat around the naming as well. So refresh us on what happened there. And then I'm just curious, as you reflect back on that, how did you take that feedback in the moment? And then what have you done or what have you processed since that feedback as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the finale, Gordon Ramsay brought on two experts, both of them very well versed in retail distribution and CBG, right?
Yep.
And so one of the biggest feedback that I got was the confusion of our coffee beans being in milk carton and the name of the company being Fat Miilk.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this is nothing I don't already know, right? In the case that I launched the company in 2020 and we did so many pop-ups. I mean, we did pop-ups all over Chicago. I mean, anywhere and everywhere, gyms, Chinese restaurants, parks, everywhere. I mean, and we got all of that feedback, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And people would say the same things, and I definitely took all of that into consideration. And a lot of people don't know that when I was filming for the show, I was already looking to address those concerns. And I was also negotiating the lease for our first storefront, right? So I was doing all of that because we all are there and we all have businesses. That's the whole premise of the show is that we're all entrepreneurs. We're all still working on our business. We still have to keep the business afloat while we're filming for the show in full anxiety mode. I mean, it was like a whole flex from mental, emotional, everything physical. And I will say, those were, it was definitely confirming when he gave me that feedback that this was definitely something that we needed to address. And so when I came back from the show, I found my dream creative agency who was going to help me rebrand the entire business, right? And I'm someone that has incredible intentionality, maybe to a detriment sometimes, I want to understand every decision we make with intention. Like if someone tells me, oh, these are our brand colors, I want to know why.
Yeah.
It has to have a reason. It has to have some kind of intention as to why you made that decision. And it can't just be because you like it. In my opinion, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, right? And so a lot of people don't know that, I named the company Fat Miilk because when people think of Vietnamese coffee, the most popular way to consume Vietnamese coffee is with a little bit of sweetened condensed milk, right? And so when people say, oh, have you had Vietnamese coffee before? They're like, oh yeah, I don't like it. It's too sweet. Or it's like, oh yeah, I do love it. It's sweet and this and this and that. And I'm like, that's just one version to enjoy Vietnamese coffee. But Vietnamese coffee is just beans from Vietnam, right? And it's a very bold, nutty, chocolatey, 2 times the caffeine content type of bean that when you add a little bit of sweetened condensed milk to it, it just is the perfect balance. So when I named the company Fat Miilk, not only do we intend to do some exciting things with condensed milk, but also I get to educate people like, look, the reason why it's called Fat Miilk is because you probably think sweetened condensed milk equates to Vietnamese coffee, right? But let me tell you why it's not. And so I get to educate consumers and tell a broader story as to why Vietnamese coffee is what it is. And so when I came back from the show and hired on Truffle, they're an amazing creative agency out in LA, I had them challenge me on every single decision I have made up until that point, right? And I said, challenge me. Why did I name it Fat Miilk? Why is the logo a water buffalo? Why the colors? Why the milk carton? Why this? Why that? And if I didn't have a good answer for that, then we needed to come up with a solution, And so we're about to launch our Fat Miilk 2.0 is what I call it, because I had a huge opportunity and a huge blessing to kind of redirect this whole brand in a way where now it's viable to scale. It's really good logistically, when it comes to complexity, just the packaging itself, it's ready to grow and just use all of that feedback, all of the last couple of years to now put the company in a position to really play in the category.
Yeah. And what I love about that, my takeaway there is your openness and receptiveness to be challenged, right? I think so often, especially as a founder, right? It's your baby, it's your product. And there's moments where we have to set ego aside, right? And acknowledge and recognize hey, we've done an awesome job of getting the product to this point. I started this literally from an idea to a product that people are willing to pay for. That is an amazing accomplishment, And then to say, okay, next level, you talked about, hiring an agency, you obviously have input and feedback and, it sounds like there's some consumer research going on there, probably formal and informal. And then to go work with an agency and say, hey, challenge me challenge me on everything that I've done, and not in a egotistical, I'm going to tell you why, but in a, I want to make sure that this is the best product that it can be.
Yes.
And if there's a way that we can make this better, I'm open. I'm
Yes.
receptive to that. That is beautiful. And that is hard to do. Very hard to do.
It is. It is. And let me tell you, when I made the decision, everyone was against me. My fractional CFO was against me. Like my team was totally against it. They were just like, no, Lan, we love it. We love the water buffalo. We love the carton. And look, it was a success in the sense that it got the attention of Gordon Ramsay. You know, if you watch the finale, our old brand is plastered all over our pop-up and, you know, that episode. And so like, it is beautiful. But when you think about it from a business perspective, it didn't put us in a position to really play, right? It was complicated. It was confusing. It was so many things. And so I will say, you know, everyone was pushing against me to keep it the way that things were. And I had to challenge everyone and be like, look, I'm making this decision. We need to address these issues, because if we expand and we're in Iowa and Nebraska, are we going to be able to sit on the shelf and have it communicate exactly who we are as a brand without us being there? If I can't say that with our current brand, then we need to make some changes. And there were days, let me tell you, where I was genuinely depressed. Like I remember when we made the decision to nix our logo, which is a water buffalo, the national animal of Vietnam, but it has no relevance to coffee because coffee is not grown in the water, by the way. That was a really dark day for me, because I was like, what have I been doing this whole time? Like, you know, I feel like I built this brand. People, you know, really love it. They resonate with the water buffalo. It kind of looks like the Chicago Bulls, you know, we're based in Chicago. It was this whole thing, and people were genuinely sad about it. And I was sad about it. And I had to stick to my gut and be like, we're letting it go. It's not going to be our logo anymore, you know? And so that was really hard for me during the rebrand, but I stand by what it looks like now, and I know it can go the distance.
Well, that's the key, go the distance, right? I mean, I think what you're talking about there, the vision, you know, I think about me as a consumer in Columbus, Ohio, going to the coffee shelf, like that's what you're talking about next level, right? You're not talking about your inner circle or people that are, you know, attached to the brand and from Jump Street. And there's risk in any one of those decisions, obviously. But, you know, I think that you're talking about, hey, how do I take this to the next level, and the bigger vision that you can see. So much there to take away as you shared that. Let me go. I want to share with our listeners and talk about the timeline of what you built, because it's really incredible in a short period of time. So April 2019, you incorporated, you got the trademark. July 2020, you were furloughed from your pharmacy job. September 2020, just 2 months after that furlough, you launched Fat Miilk as a brand. December 2020, you secured wholesale partnerships. April 2022, season 1 of Ramsay, Gordon Ramsay's food show starts. August 2022, lease signed for the storefront. We'll talk about that here in a moment. August 2023, launched Kickstarter. I mean, we're talking about a very brief period of time where a lot was happening. And if I'm following correctly, you were furloughed from your pharmacy job, and that really accelerated the growth of your business. But the idea had been around prior to that furlough. Am I following that correctly?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. And
that's why people say, just to quickly plug in there, people say, how did you launch this company in 2 months? It's like, I've been conceptualizing, which is the longest part, by the way. When you're thinking about how you're going to do it, what it's going to look like and execute, I've been doing that for years, you know? And so when it came to the opportunity to actually put it in motion, that's how we were able to launch in 2 months. Business, you know what I mean? But like, if I just thought about this in 2 months and launched it, I mean, I just want to make that clear that, you know, this was something that was brewing for a while.
Do you think you would have pursued this regardless if the furlough happened? Would it just been a delayed timeline? I'm curious to hear your reflection back on how much of the furlough was an accelerator or an initiator, or, you know, if you would have grown in that role or maybe pursued a fellowship industry pathway, like, is there a place where this idea maybe never sees the light of day, or it would have just been maybe a little bit more down the road?
Yeah, Fat Miilk was 100% going to happen.
Awesome.
Yes, 100%. I will say that furlough was the biggest blessing in my life, because I told myself, once I get to this point, I'm going to quit and go all in on Fat Miilk. And then that timeline started to get pushed back. Once I get here, I'm going to do that. And so that furlough was just like, I took that as a sign, the universe telling me it is time to go, And so I think when I got furloughed, I didn't have a choice. I was furloughed. I had no choice but to make my dream come true, as opposed to like go and look for another pharmacy job, So that was a big sign for me, and I ran with it. I saw that opportunity and I'm like, this is it. This is the world telling me you need to go and do this. And so when they asked me to come back 2 months later, I said, nope, I already launched it. I already launched the company. So I'm just going to focus on this now. Yeah.
Lan, I'm curious, as you think about all the different aspects involved in starting and growing a business, running a business, right? Marketing, sales, building a team, culture of the company, finances, distribution, supply chain management. When you think about all the different pieces that you've been involved, what has been the area that's had the biggest learning curve and growth for you over the past few years?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think everything has been a learning curve. I will say just the transition from going from a very regulated, structured lifestyle, with not only being a student in higher education for 10 years, but then going into pharmacy, to then going into entrepreneurship. That has always and still is a very big challenge in my life, right? I think when you transition from, going from a corporate structure into anything on your own, you are the corporate structure. And a lot of people don't know that, they're just like, wait, what am I supposed to do? You've been told, I've been told exactly how my seasons look. You have your fall semester, you have your spring semester, you have summer break, and then from there, when you go to work, you have your schedule, you have your shifts, you have your, the things that you can and cannot do, especially a very regulated industry like pharmacy. There is no creative flexes in there. And so when I went from my entire life of living in structure to then going on and starting my own business, I had to wake up every day, and sometimes I didn't know what to do. It's like, wait, you have so many things you need to do, and you have so many things you need to learn, and you don't actually know where you put your time and energy into what is going to convert for you the most. So it's so much trial and error, and just learning how to prioritize your days. And sometimes you don't even move the needle an inch, right? Because you're just like, okay, well, I guess I realize, focusing on this email newsletter, or what, like trying to, cold call a bunch of other brands. It didn't go anywhere, but you have to keep trying and see. And I think even till this moment, I still have to segment and learn that structure in my day that I thrived in corporate culture, to then apply that to my own life and being able to deliver and execute for my team and for the future and growth of Fat Miilk. And like you said earlier, you are your biggest asset to your company, like truly how you operate and how you structure your days. And if you feel good about that day, if you feel productive about how you structure that day, all of that is such a big influence on how your company ends up doing, right? And so I always say, like, the only person that's getting in the way is me. I feel like I can teach it to myself. I can teach myself supply chain and customs and importing beans and all of these things. But if I'm not feeling it that day, that ultimately is, my business is going to take a hit, and it's like, now you have to learn discipline to a T. And that is the hardest thing.
Yeah. And I think to give yourself some grace, like, you gave the example of like a day, you can spend a day making cold calls or working on a newsletter, and you're like, hey, I thought that was going to be a high impact priority day, where me as the founder and the CEO can move the needle the most. And sometimes it's not. Or you say, okay, that worked, that didn't work. Now I'm going to evolve. Now I'm going to shift. But giving yourself some grace in those moments of, maybe I didn't tangibly move forward the business today, but I learned something, and I learned that, hey, this doesn't work, or I've got to iterate. And, I think sometimes, the wins need to be reveled in and enjoyed and celebrated. But also there are those days, there are the seasons, there are the weeks, where you grind or you're like, I don't even know where to start on the list of things to be done. And like those moments, those seasons, those days are going to happen. They're just going to happen. And, I think to recognize them, and obviously you're speaking from experience there, is so important to give yourself grace in that season.
It's real.
As you think about the future of Fat Miilk, you've mentioned Fat Miilk 2.0 a couple times. You mentioned at least once or twice getting ready to open a storefront. Tell us about what's next for Fat Miilk in this 2.0 iteration and where you see the brand going here over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. We're at such a pivotal time in the company right now in the sense that we had an opportunity to really restart the brand, right? And do it with intention. A lot of brands don't get to do that. And not only that, but we just had recent credibility from the Gordon Ramsay show, right? And so I'm really adopting this clicks and bricks business model. If you look at businesses like Warby Parker and Apple, they have their online presence, but they also have this in-person, on the ground brand experience, right? And I think that's so necessary for an emerging market. And so you'll be seeing a lot of us double downing on our digital footprint, but also expanding our community outreach, right? Through different storefronts throughout Chicago and expanding to major cities. But also what's really important to me is approaching Fat Miilk with the utmost respect for the farmers and the coffee industry, right? And if, I don't want to bore people with the history here, but, just due to climate change, the Robusta bean is actually going to be the biggest shift in consumer just brands in general when it comes to coffee and what is going to be readily available, right? And so we have an opportunity to really be a huge player in the impact of climate change. And I'm really looking into upcycling every single layer of the coffee bean itself, because a lot of people don't know it's a cherry. So there's a fruit around it, and the seed in the middle is the actual coffee bean. And so I'm working with farmers right now to see how we can upcycle parts of the pulp and the skin of the cherry to use in some of our other verticals. And that's been really exciting for me. And maybe that's the compounding part of pharmacy that I really enjoy, and being able to take something and make something new out of it. So that's kind of the approach for Fat Miilk moving forward, is having consumer experience in multiple channels, but also doing something with the coffee cherry itself and having an impact on just the industry.
And I think that connects so well to your strength that you talked about, towards the beginning of the episode, which is your strength around the branding, the marketing, the creative side, the storytelling, right? Bringing the cup of coffee to individuals as an experience. And I think we've come a long way as a consumer, but I would argue we have more to go. And you're obviously tapping into that, I think some people maybe just want a cup of coffee every morning. They don't want to think about it. But I think there's a big market of people that, are very interested in where is this bean coming from? And what is, the story of the farm? What is the story of the roaster? And, how can this really come to be an experience and not just something that's a functional part of the day that I don't really think a whole lot about, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think a small part of people, I will say, a minority group of people really, really geek out about that stuff. But I think there's an opportunity for, mass appeal for people to care about that stuff. You have to do it. You have to do it with lifestyle. You have to do it where it's a party and not a protest, right? Because climate change can very easily go into this protest mode, right? Where we're not doing things right. We're contributing to it, and kind of playing this blame game. But if you can create a brand where people just really resonate with, the packaging and what you're doing and the vibes you're giving off, they naturally are inclined to care more about why you exist. And that's the approach that I'm taking. And I think a lot of brands go so far right or one way or the other about, going deep into climate change, talking really, really using these big words and things that people get really bored about, when it comes to the impact of the pulp and, just the coffee production and how that can impact just the industry and the the world. And so I think the best people to do it are brands who have a way to engage customers without them actually even knowing that they're engaged.
That is fantastic. And this has been a real treat. I am so grateful for you coming on the show and sharing your journey. And I'm really excited to follow what's ahead. I have a feeling you're just getting warmed up here. So where is the best place that our listeners can go to follow your journey and learn more about what you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. We're pretty active on social media. So it's, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of that is at Fat Miilk with 2 I. So FATMIILK. Best place to just get our coffee, experience the brand will always be fatmiilk.com. And then for people who are in Chicago or visiting Chicago, we are building up our Chicago flagship storefront. And that is in Uptown at the corner of Broadway and Argyle.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And when you decide to expand into Columbus, Ohio, you'll have to let me know, Lan. So
absolutely.
Great market here as well. But in all seriousness, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Justin again from the YFP team. Thanks for tuning in to today's podcast. If you're a pharmacy professional, you know how crucial it is to have access to reliable drug information. That's why we're excited to tell you about Pearls, today's podcast sponsor. Gone are the days spending hundreds of dollars for access to drug information. Pearls offers top drug summaries, clinical teaching points, a drug interaction checker, calculators, and guideline reviews, all in a user-friendly resource. Whether you prefer accessing information through your web browser, Chrome extension, or mobile app, Pearls has got you covered. Plus, for a limited time, you can visit pearls.com to get access to more than 25 free pharmacotherapy charts to get you started. Upgrade your drug information resource today with Pearls. Visit pearls.com. That's PYRLS.com to learn more. Thanks again for listening.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.